Good morning, everyone. Many years ago, I was on a bus in Greece. And as many of you know, despite the massive size of the buses, the drivers are usually pretty handy and able to maneuver them on the smallest, windiest of roads amongst the mountains in Greece. I was on a bus on a road like this, coming down from a mountain village, when all of a sudden the bus stopped. Much to the driver's frustration, there was a small car parked halfway on the shoulder and halfway on the road. So the bus could not get through. After a barrage of honking, the bus driver got out of the bus. He discovered that there was no one in the car, and one by one, a few people also on the bus got off of the bus to go and search for the would-be driver in the surrounding area amongst the few coffee shops and tavernas. The rest of us watched from the bus windows above as a handful of people searched high and low for the owner of this car. But after 10 or 15 long minutes, there was still no driver to be found. And we got word that our bus driver had given up looking for the owner of the car, and now he had called the police. And after about 5 minutes, the police showed up on their motorcycles, but they could not solve this problem for us either. And after some shouting and animated hand gestures between the policeman and the bus driver, the policemen hopped back on their motorcycles and drove away. So now what? All of us on this bus were stranded, and we wondered what would happen next. Who would move this car for us so that we could continue on our way? A few moments later, the bus driver climbed back into the bus, and he pointed at about 5 different men, and he told them one by one to go outside. As the men walked past him to go outside, the bus driver took one last look around the bus, and then he pointed at me to go outside as well. I had no idea what was about to happen. But the bus driver said to us in Greek, "Θα το κάνουμε εμείς," which means, we'll do it ourselves. So one by one, each of the men grabbed a hold of the bottom of the car. But I watched for a second and thought to myself, okay, this is crazy. No way can we move this car here. Even though the car was a small European hatchback, the concept of men lifting and moving a car was absolutely impossible to me. The bus driver saw me watching, and he said, "You too, get over here." So I grabbed a hold of the car with them. The bus driver counted to 3, and to my shock and amazement, we lifted the car off the road and slid it all the way onto the shoulder. And after patting each other on the back, we ascended the stairs back onto the bus to the sound of applause from the other passengers. So many times in life, we run into problems. And when we run into our problems, our first thought is, someone else needs to solve this problem for me. For the bus driver, he first thought the owner of the car needed to fix our problem. When that didn't work, he thought the police needed to fix our problem. Ultimately, as we found out, the only people who could actually fix our problem was indeed ourselves. Our first instinct when we run into a big problem in life is that God needs to fix it. He needs to step in and save us from our difficulties. He needs to step in and make everything right. Of course, it is good to place our hope in God during difficult times, but as we do, we need to remember that the first step is to step up to the plate and try our hardest to fix our problems ourselves. God, of course, is all-powerful. He is almighty, but He created you and He created me, each with our own talents and strengths. Human beings are capable of amazing things because we, of course, are created by God. And God knows we are capable of amazing things, which is why He often pushes us to solve our own problems or large problems in general on our own. In today's gospel passage, we see a heartwarming image of a caring father, desperate father, bringing his sick and afflicted son first to the apostles and then to Jesus for healing. The desperate father says to Jesus, "I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able." In other words, he's saying, why couldn't they solve my problem for me? So first the father looked to the apostles to solve the problem, and then he looks to Jesus to solve his problem. He says to Christ, "If you can do anything, have pity on us and help us." And here we have one of the most interesting responses from Jesus in all of the Gospels. He immediately responds to the Father by saying, "If you can, all things are possible to him who believes." Jesus turns the Father's plea right back around at him. And the Father shows that he is up to the task when he responds in action, "I believe, Lord, help my unbelief." In this moment, the Father meets God halfway. He affirms that he believes his problem can be solved. He affirms that he believes in God's power, and Jesus then, of course, does the rest. Upon hearing this from the Father, it says, Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You dumb and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." In other words, problem solved. Here is the moment of action for our dad in the passage. Up to this point, he has accused the disciples of being failures. But suddenly, when he's confronted by Jesus, he realizes the failure of his own. He has not believed it is possible for anyone to help his son. The failure is not the disciples alone. The man himself must be willing to work and trust in God. Not just to dump his problem on God and blame God and his followers for their failure. The father accepts his responsibility in what happens, and he undergoes a change of heart and begins to cooperate with God. The dad was demanding, but he was not praying. The dad's heart had to be changed, and he had to become a man of prayer, not just a man demanding that his wishes be granted. And all of this helps us understand that faith is not a faucet that we turn on and off to get what we want. Faith is a living, trusting relationship with God and Jesus Christ. It is a total life commitment to God, and we hope in him and trust in him and believe in him and rely on him. When we manage to live in a relationship with God, then we have faith. We must meet God halfway. We must not look at him from afar, sitting back and waiting for him to do everything for us. And the idea here, of course, is if we are able to live in a relationship with God, we can then and only then also healthily live in good relationships with everyone else around us. Today is the fourth Sunday in Lent, and it is known as the Sunday of St. John Climacus. St. John Climacus wrote a book called The Ladder of Divine Ascent, which, to summarize, is essentially a step-by-step guidebook on how to get into heaven. Really? Did you even know there was a book for that? Probably not. And since we commemorate St. John Climacus today, I thought it would be fitting to hear from some of the advice in his book, The Ladder of Divine Ascent. St. John says, "A discerning man, when he eats grapes, takes only the ripe grapes and leaves the sour. Thus also the discerning mind carefully marks the virtues which he sees in another person. A mindless man seeks out the failings in another person. Even if you see someone sin with your own eyes, do not judge, for often even your eyes are deceived." So we hear directly from the guidebook on how to get to heaven, on how to deal with other people. St. John tells us to keep an eye on their virtues and dismiss their failings. So, with our gospel passage today and the ladder of divine ascent that we celebrate, we have quite a little guidebook to life itself. First, we take control in our own lives and show the courage to attack our problems head on. Then we combine this mindset with a meaningful connection to God based in faith. And finally, we can then connect to other people, focusing on their best qualities. Overcome problems, connect to God, and respect and love other people. The Christian life in a nutshell. The directions from the Gospels and the saints are excellent, of course, but it is up to us to follow these directions. Let this be our challenge to ourselves during the Lent of this Lenten period as we move towards Holy Week and the resurrection. Amen.